Welcome to the Recovery Roundtable podcast, where the journey to sobriety opens up through powerful discussions and shared experiences. Join your host, Mark, who will bring you stories of triumph and resilience from the heart of Pacific Shores recovery. Every episode offers insights and support, guiding you through the challenges of addiction recovery. Thank you for joining our community. If you're ready to start or continue your recovery journey, we're here to inspire and support you. Let's explore recovery together.
So I'm so stoked to have you here because I've known of your name for at least a decade.
Yeah.
We've run in the same circles, but never actually officially met. So I just got to meet you as you came
it's
here.
Nice to meet you for sure today. Yeah.
I've been a fan just kind of hearing, and you have a wonderful reputation, which is something to be said in this industry.
In some circles, depending on who's talking.
Yeah, big time. So why don't you kind of give us a little background of who you are and what led you to this type of work?
A little background as far as you want to hear, like...
Whatever you're feeling, we just go. There's no structure.
my name is PEJ. I am an interventionist and a recovery coach now in my life, and that's one of the many things that I do, but I am a Persian man that was born in Germany and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah for the first portion of my life. 5 to 15 years of age, that's where I grew up. I was educated here in the United States. I learned English in the school. First language was German, but I forgot it, and then Farsi in the house. And I experienced everything from bullying to experimenting with drugs and alcohol at a very young age. We had moved to California when I was 15, and we first moved here to Costa Mesa. I love Costa Mesa. Over a period of time, during that time between 15 to 16, the whole high school era thing, like the parties, hanging out with people, caravanning around town, going to keggers and all that stuff, it became a regular thing. I drank, I used, and what really happened to me that was extremely traumatic was 17 years of age. I was on my way to school one morning driving, and I had my car. A lot of people were piled into my car, and we were on our way to school. I was sober that morning, and it had rained the night before, and there was a lot of laughter in the car. There was music blaring, and as we're going up this street, we got to an intersection, and a 14-year-old kid was on his bike, and he darted out in the street in front of my car, and I couldn't hit the brakes fast enough, and his bicycle and his body went over the top of the hood of my car, the front. And he hit the windshield shattered, and the car kept rolling and crashed into a minivan. And this kid's body was flung over the minivan head first into the ground. And so, in that moment, everything just went into slow motion. And I got out the car, tasted blood trickling down my face into my mouth from the impact of the windshield, saw blood all over my friends' faces. And I thought, in one instance, did I hit a human body? And I went and looked around the side of the minivan and saw the kid laying face down with blood gushing out the top of his head. And then police came, ambulance came. The ambulance whisked him off to the hospital. Police took me down to the police station, asked me a lot of questions, and they realized I wasn't under the influence, so they let me go. And so for the next few days, I was kind of on the edge of my seat, like, what next? Yeah. I had heard that the mom was keeping him on life support, contemplating if she was going to keep him alive or not, and she ended up deciding not to, because he probably would have been a vegetable for the rest of his life from the impact of his head hitting the asphalt. So he lost his life, and here I am, the 17-year-old kid who's already involved in drugs and alcohol, and this became like an ultimate excuse just to get loaded morning, noon, and night. And that's exactly what I did. I got kicked out of my regular high school, went to the continuation school where nothing good happens there, and then after that, I started getting into a lot of trouble, just doing bad things, acting like a little delinquent, just doing bad things. And I ended up in juvenile hall, and thus started my journey into the system.
That's a lot to carry for a 17-year-old.
Yeah. It was a really hard time, but very traumatic.
Yeah.
Beyond. So I ended up being in juvie for a while. My parents got separated also, which didn't sit well with me because we came together to this country from Germany as a family unit. And I got out of juvie, was between both of their homes for a little while, and then I entered young adulthood, and I was engulfed in drug addiction and alcoholism from a very young age, and it was just a way of life. It was my greatest coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. And I also definitely had a lot of dreams, goals, aspirations that at this point, I wasn't really following many of them. Throughout my young adulthood into my 20s, I did create. I took my artistic stuff, because I was an artist, to a different level. I created a clothing line here in Costa Mesa, and then a surfboard, skateboard, snowboard line that was all part of that, and we were selling it on a national level, but I had no business sense. I never went to school for any of that stuff, and all the money that was funded into this whole business was coming from drug sales. That's kind of just the way I was getting by. I didn't really work for anybody during that time, and I tried to go to college. I'd drop out of college because I was always under the influence. I tried to work in the workplace. I couldn't hold a job because I was loaded all the time. So best was just to open shop, sell drugs out of the house, and then start a little business. And the business lasted for a while, and we had some adventures, right? I know that had you been my friend or in our friend circle and seen PEJ, most people would have thought, well, PEJ has got it going on. He's got the pretty girls that come from the strip clubs and things like that to the house. He's got all these friends that answer to him, and really like that, when that would stroke my ego, and I would really think I was really all that. I was buying the lie, the facade, but deep within the pit of my stomach, there was always this sense of impending doom. And in recovery, we talk about a God-sized hole, and I'm clear on the fact that I was filling the void within me with drugs and alcohol. And also, tucked in the back of my head was that kid lost his life, and that's your fault. At least psychologically, that's what I felt and thought. So by the time I was 30 years old, I was having more run-ins with the law. I was getting locked up a lot, and that wasn't getting me better. I went to Persian sober living, if you will, at that time in Huntington Beach. It was like 2002. And I remember there was this guy named Siamak that was the guy that ran it. And I kid you not, when he answered the door, he looked like a little Persian recovery Yoda. He even sounded like had kind of like a Yoda tone, and with a Persian accent. I remember he told me when I walked into his house, I'm 30 years old, he's fresh out of jail. He said, "Hello, welcome. This is sober living. We have rules, we have regulations, we have chores, we go to meetings." I'm like, riveting. And I told him, "Listen, this nice house you got here, I saw the bedrooms and all that stuff. I'm not staying here." And I ended up coming, I went with Plan B, which was this house right down the street from here, run by a guy named Dave Regal, God rest his soul. But Dave was one of them, he was like this recovery Nazi, like just a mean guy. I don't know if you know who that guy was, but he pretty much had some requirements. One of them was to go to meetings, so I'd go to the Newport Club down here. And that's about it. I pretty much just did time in a sober living. I was figuring out ways of getting out of here sooner, and that's exactly what I did. I was really clever in that sense. I knew what to say to my mom for her to bring me back into her house. I also was fighting a major meth sales case. They were they were going to try to get me on manufacturing too, but I wasn't doing that. But she got me this high-powered attorney. It was actually Christopher Darden that was on the OJ case, and that guy helped me dodge a cannonball. And in that time, I was required to go to meetings and things like that. But I never really cared about recovery. I didn't want to get sober, none of that. So once I dodged that cannonball to go to prison, I stopped going to meetings. I didn't really do recovery anymore. And by doing it my way and living my lifestyle the way that I thought best for me, by the time I was 35 years old, I was a homeless man living here on the streets, living out of my car, and had nothing going for me. My mom wrote me off like a bad check, changed the locks on her doors because she didn't trust me at all. And so, I try to live that lifestyle as a homeless man. And I didn't think I really was doing too bad because I wasn't like the people that live in those tents in the embankments or the guy that's laid out on the front asphalt of some store. I still had a car. I go stay at some people's houses here and there. I go take a shower at the gym, and every once in a while I have to sleep in my car. But I call it executive homeless. That's kind of how I felt like I was living. And just it wasn't working anymore. By the time I was a few months in, 7 months, probably 7 months of homelessness, I ended up going to somebody's house to detox my way. And my way would be to quit doing meth, heroin, and cocaine, but I could still smoke weed and drink, and that's not detoxing. You know, it's basically quitting the heavy stuff. And, you know, there was a series of events that happened where some people said some things at the right time for me to capture it and, like, to hear it. And my heart, because of the amount of meth I was using, was having these palpitating murmurs. I felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. Like, I really felt like a heart attack was in my future. And then my liver too, there was a lot of, probably from drinking and things like that. But so between what people were telling me and the way my body was shutting down, I decided to do what I feared the most, and that was to call my mom for help, because she wanted nothing to do with me when I left. And she gave me a phone number, and she didn't want to say much more, and gave me this number, and I called the phone number, and the man led me to a house in Irvine. And I was supposed to be there at 9 a.m. on a Friday morning. And so that's where I went. And I remember I parked the car out front. I knocked on the door, and lo and behold, the guy that answered the door was a little Persian recovery Yoda from 5 years before, Mr. Sia. And I remember I just looked him right in his eyes. Hello, how are you doing? Welcome. I'm like, this guy again. Like, I know you. And he said, well, I don't know you. I go, how do you now remember me? You had a house on Beach Boulevard 5 years ago, didn't you? And he goes, I had the house. Don't remember you. I go, how do you not remember me? And he goes, because I remember the ones that stay. You know, I remember the ones that stay. And so he brought me into his house, and we did the intake process, and I told him, you know, I don't really, like, there's two things that are probably going to prevent me from coming into your home. He had this structured recovery home, right? Kind of ran like a treatment center, like he did groups and things, even had a therapist that would come see some people. Wasn't licensed or anything like that, just kind of back to basic style. But the two conditions I said is, one, I don't believe in God, and I never want to talk about God, and I don't want to hear about God. Do not try to sell me on the God idea. And he said, okay, we don't talk about God very much. I said, and the other one is, don't send me to any of these meetings, none of that 12-step stuff, none of AA, none of that. He said, we don't go to many meetings. And I said, great. And that night we were in a meeting, and the next day we were in a meeting at noon, and one in the evening, and we were in 2 meetings for the entire duration of my stay. So I don't think he was really working an honest program. But, you know, he sent me to these meetings, and something changed within me. First of all, I turned 36 while I was at his house, a couple weeks later. And after being called on my stuff, which you know, he'd tell me, you're so inauthentic, you're inauthentic about your own inauthenticity. I'm like, I have no idea what that means. And he said, you're so full of crap, you're full of crap about being full of crap. He goes, when are you going to get real with yourself, PEJ? Like, you've been to jails and institutions and homelessness. You've experienced all that. You're in rehab now, and you're still not honest. And between that, him telling me that, and then doing a psychodrama on me, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like a, you know.
Open it up. Let's share. This episode is brought to you by Pacific Shores. We have been an industry leader for over 25 years in the mental health and addiction space. We have helped thousands and thousands of individuals and families reclaim their lives. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please reach out so we can do this together. Our number is 949-749-7317.
I mean, what he did was, after he heard my story in his office, and I told him everything that had happened to me, he came to the conclusion that we should do this thing that it's a practice that he would do called psychodrama. And I said, okay, how's that work? He goes, in 2 weeks, I'm going to invite your mom, who hasn't been visiting you or taking your calls, to be here in a family group, which was right down the street here in this little place that he had rented out, which was like a community room. And he had one of the clients bring their 12-year-old kid and laid him on the ground and put a bed sheet over his body and face. And he had me, he dimmed the lights, and all these people were sitting in a big circle around it. And he had me walk through the whole experience of that day of my car accident and talk about it. He wanted details, like, what was the smell in the air? I'm like, lemon trees. What was playing on the radio? Summer of '69, Bryan Adams. Who was in the car? I told him all the names and everything, the laughter, the whole vibe. And then he said, okay, then what happened? Well, the kid pulled up in front of me, and I hit him, and I couldn't hit the brakes fast enough. And he goes, okay, come over here and get on your knee, put your hand on top of this. This represents the corpse of the kid that you hit. I'm like, oh, come on, this is heavy. He said, just be with me. I'm like, all right. What was the kid's name? I said, David. He said, tell David how you feel about him losing his life. And I said, I'm so sorry that you lost your life as a result of that car accident. I never intended for that to happen. I regret it every day. I wish I could go back and erase that entire day and start over again. I said, okay, now tell David how you feel about your life. And I said, my life? I don't have a life. I've never had a life, not a real life. I don't know what having a life is like. And he said, okay, so how about this, Pej? You want to make a commitment? And he put his hand on my shoulder and he kneeled down on one knee next to me. And I said, yeah, I'll make a commitment. He said, well, what's your commitment? I said, I want to help every single addict and alcoholic of every age, race, creed, and color one day at a time for the rest of my life. And I don't even know where that came from, Mark. I must have been sitting in these rooms and catching recovery against my consent. And it just flowed out of me as if God was talking through me. And then I looked at my mom's face, and her face was shaking and crying. The whole room was in tears. It was a very powerful moment. And I realized right in that moment, Pej, you need to do this 100%, because if you mess this one up, you are a loser. And so that night in rehab, I went and slept and woke up the next morning, and I felt like 1,000 pounds was lifted off of my back. Everything I'd been carrying all those years that I always wished I could get out and around the appropriate people, my wish was granted, and it was God-given. And I remember it was my complete turning point. I made a decision from that day on. We are not going to entertain the thought of smoking weed or drinking down the line anymore. We're going to get real with ourselves, and we're going to do what we're supposed to do. So I went straight to the guy that was going to help me the best, and that would be Siamak. I realized that God put that man in my path when I was 30, and I wasn't ready to learn anything from him. As a matter of fact, like that day in Huntington at 30, the word recovery came out of his mouth more than any other word, and it was plenty of times enough to where it turned me off and my disease off. But they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and that the day 5 years later that I ended up at his front doorstep and him answered, that there's no coincidences. That's God's way of staying anonymous, you know. And he became one of my greatest teachers. You know, I'd sit in the groups and I'd give feedback, and he'd say, "You're really good at the feedback." He pulled me aside afterwards. "You're really good at the feedback, but you have no empathy." I'm like, "What does that mean?" "I don't even know what empathy means." "Sounds like sympathy." He goes, "It's something along those lines." He goes, "You go straight for the throat. It's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. And I think you should go to school." I'm like, "I don't go to school. I won't go to school. Not school for me." He said, "No, I really think you'd do well in school." I go, "I'd never do well in school. I was a 1.8 grade point average kid in high school. And I went to the Art Institute as an artist and got put on academic probation twice at 32 years of age, and then walked off the campus by the dean of students because she said, 'You're not a good fit for this school,' because I was always under the influence." He goes, "Well, that's the problem. You were always under the influence. Have you ever tried to go into school completely sober?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, maybe you might actually do better." I said, "You know what? You haven't let me down so far. I've started to pay my bills. I've made all my court appearances. I got a sponsor. I'm working steps. What do I need to do?" And so I signed up at Saddleback College, and I went in with an open mind. And sure enough, I finished top of my class, 4.0 student, dean's list. I never saw the number 4.0 attached to my name. Come on. But I did really well, and so I went into the field of addiction. I started working in adolescent treatment, and then I started working in adult treatment. And a lot of great things have happened. You know, at that time I was probably 6 or 7 years sober. I had worked at Trader Joe's as a get-well job for a long time while I put myself through school and paid my way through life, self-supporting by my own contributions. But I remember when the time came for me to start doing this, I wanted to work in recovery and make a difference. And so, you know, I ran groups, and I loved groups. That was one of my specialties, still is to this day. And I ran many different types of groups, you know, 4 agreements, self-discovery, quest for virtue, some 12-step groups and things like that. But people told me, "Pej, you have a good message, and it needs to be heard, you know, on a broader scale." And so I wanted to take it to the next level, and I started getting in front of the camera, I had told you earlier, on a podcast, and that was in 2017. That's kind of where I got my feet wet with the whole podcast thing, and that was fun, you know. And in that time, I went out and in the last decade, I've been trained as an interventionist under the direction of a gentleman by the name of Earl Hightower, who's like an interventionist extraordinaire. He's been doing it 40 years. And he's my sponsor in AA too, I'll say that. Mm-hmm. But he's just a beautiful human being. God has placed angels like Siamak and my first sponsor, Amir, and my second sponsor, Aaron, and then Earl in my path to show me. And I also was trained by somebody as a life coach, sober coach, and became very experienced in that. I had moved up to LA and opened up some very structured sober livings, and so I've worked with different populations, you know. But the disease of addiction never discriminates. I've seen them on Skid Row, and I've seen them in the hills, living in the hills, and it's always, you know, pretty much the same disease. But yeah, so, you know, I moved back down to Orange County in end of 2015, early 2016, and I've always kind of lived between here and there, both OC and LA, for work. You know, right now I have a YouTube channel that is PEJ Interventions, and a website that's PEJinterventions.com. I got TikTok famous, not knowing that I would. During pandemic, someone told me, you want to build your brand fastest, go on TikTok. I'm like, that's for kids. And you know what? Once I did it, he was right. So I have a media team now that films me making short educational pieces. It's everything I learned from drug and alcohol studies, personal experience, people I've worked with. I've watched the fentanyl craze grow. I've seen everything from body brokering. I talk about all of it, everything I've experienced. I love it. There's never a dull moment in my life. I own 2 very extremely structured sober livings right now, a men's house, a women's house, very much modeled after the types of homes I went through. So we're no nonsense. We're very 12-step based. And, you know, I had a friend not that long ago tell me, PEJ, why don't you teach at Saddleback? I'm like, I don't have that type of experience. She goes, oh, you do? I go, look, I took drug and alcohol studies and got a certificate. That's about as far as it went. She goes, wait, you're not like, there's nothing else? You didn't do any more education? I go, no. She goes, well, you should. And I said, so what should I do? Because if I did, I'd have to go back and do general education first to be able to get some kind of a bachelor's or whatever. She goes, that's all you really need is a bachelor's to teach there. And so now I'm back in school. And so I take some classes just to finish that up and hopefully down the line get some letters behind my name, because I would like to teach. I've always liked, you know, in this journey of life, teaching and helping people learn. And I do part of a thing called Intervention on Call, which is a bunch of interventionists that are on a national level and international level. And I joined their team. We're like a legion of interventionists, just really good men and women. And we do a lot of family education, but we also do individual coaching sessions, and then we do interventions. And we get calls from all over the country and world, and so that's that deal. And then being a Persian, Iranian man, I also serve that community because Siamak died 2 years ago, and this other guy that was also serving the Persian community. So I'm like the only one left, last of the Mohicans. And I do a Persian group too, just educating families, because they're some of the most codependent people that I've ever had in my life and encountered. So I've done a lot of talking. Do you have any questions?
No, I just have been listening and making mental notes as you're sharing your story. What an amazing story. So, yeah, most people have some form of horrific trauma that happens that puts them down this path of pain.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the pain is the purpose and the peace. And so it sounds like it was a few decades of going through trials and tribulations and different things to find that purpose of saying, I don't want anyone else to go through this type of pain in life.
Yeah.
And because of that intimate knowledge, you're able to actually go forward now and educate different races, different cultures, just really just the humankind.
Yes.
And so, gosh, how are you able to make that transition? Because that's where we see people stuck. They get stuck in the pain and the lies that we tell ourselves when we're in the pit of pain is, I'm different, I'm broken, I can't be used. And I'm curious how you were able to surrender to see it through.
I think when I was new, by having a guy like Siamak in my life, because my dad left this country and left me many years before, I was kind of neglected of the opportunity of being raised by a male figure more, like even into my young adulthood. So when God put Siamak in my life the second time, he was the type of person that became like a second father for me, but also like a person, a man of recovery that was going to teach me recovery. And what came with that was not criticism, a lot of empowerment to tap into the best version of myself, a lot of encouragement, but also he metaphorically would put a mirror in front of me to show me who I am and show me who I'm not. And I believe that not just addicts and alcoholics, the mass majority of humanity, based off the human condition, a lot of times it's like a collective ego. Depending on where we grow up and who we're around, we start imitating our atmosphere, and then that's who we think we are, and that becomes our image and our identity. So I had this outlook and thought of myself as being someone that I really wasn't, and I got to recreate myself into someone who I really am and would like to be. I came from a very educated family. My dad was a microbiologist, a virologist, a food scientist, and there was high expectations for me to become a doctor, let's say. Persians usually are supposed to go to school and become doctors, lawyers, engineers. That didn't happen. I became a drug dealer, right? And that was my identity. The type of music I listened to, the type of people, the company I kept. So and then I became a homeless man. So how did those drug sales really work out for me when I had nothing but the shirt on my back and the car that I drove? So I remember Siamak believed in me. He told me, I said, why are you so hard on me and not on the rest? He goes, because I pick my battles, PEJ, and I know some of these guys are just doing time here, and they're already gone without being gone yet. But there's something special about you, and I believe in you, and I think if you just stick by my side, we'll move mountains together. It was stuff like that. The terminology, the language, it was powerful, spiritual, uplifting. It made me believe in myself, and hence the reason I like being a coach right now. There's people that find me in so many, like they find me on TikTok and ask me to coach them. They find me on YouTube and ask me to coach them. I do an intervention. I find someone across the country on the streets of Chicago, whose family asks me to go get him. I get him into treatment. He's cleaned up and everything. And then he likes me so much, if he likes me. Some of them hate my guts. But if I build enough rapport, then we carry on with coaching. And all I do with them is what was done with me. Learn to believe in yourself. I empower them because I see the goodness in people. I'm a people person now. I want all the people that come into my houses, I know each one of them has a story, and I want to learn their story and see, why are you here? How'd you end up here? What's your past? What went on with you? All I got to do is I can read between the lines. Siamak taught me that because he used to read between the lines. All I got to do is hear just a little bit to know what I'm dealing with. I meet people where they're at. I try to find the best in them because we're all children of God. Right? They're all equal to me. I do not have favorites. I don't like one better than the other. If everybody else can't stand this one guy, I try to see what is it within that guy that I see God. Like God wants the person to be that way. Why would I get in the way of God's handiwork? And so someone saw something in me, and it's my duty to see something in others.
So the two things that you were most resistant to, you were sharing is, I call it community in Christ. You said meetings and God.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've since revisited that.
Oh, I love it now.
And the two things that you've mentioned several times, and I'm making an assumption that has actually been probably integral in your journey, is community and God. Can you kind of dive into that?
Yeah. I mean, remember, I renounced God at a young age. at the age of 17 while being locked up in juvenile hall in their psych unit, because I told them I was going to kill myself. They had me on suicide watch. I remember in those moments I thought, there's no such thing as God. I even called myself atheist for a little bit until I thought, well, what if there is a God and I'm a hardline atheist, and then I would be doomed and probably go to hell if there's a God, or if that's the type of God that there might be. So I started calling myself agnostic for a lot of years, and I kind of wore that as a badge of honor. It's better to be unsure than to be sure that there's no God. So going into the rooms a lot, like into recovery circles, AA meetings and things, if I even heard God, I would cringe and think, oh, it's just another denomination. It's just another movement. They're like church. They have a book, right? But I believe that God speaks through people. So when I first got sober at CLMAC's house, I went with contempt prior to investigation into those meetings, and I went with my arms crossed, and I went with judgment. And I had stuff going on in my head, the committee. We talk about the committee. I would sit in those rooms, and here they go again. These are the AAs talking about their little steps and their sponsorship and blah, blah, blah. But over a period of time, there was a few people. It was this one meeting I would go to. There's a black lady who was a former actress in L.A., Day knows her, and also this white guy that was a former skinhead from San Diego. And anybody else in that room could talk, and all it was Charlie Brown teacher talk. But when this man would share, and this woman would share, which was usually the same day in the same meeting, they would talk about their relationship with God. And they got along. Remember, former skinhead and a black lady. And they were around the same age, and they were friends. So I thought, something is working around here. I went to another meeting one time, and at the end, there was a Jewish guy and a Palestinian guy and an Asian guy and a black guy, me the Persian, a Mexican and a white. We're all holding hands at the end of the meeting doing the Lord's Prayer. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. So it was little things, and then there was another meeting when I had about 90 days sober where some guy raised his hand, and Judgment Row in my head zeroed in on this guy, laser focused. This guy busted out with a share that was so profound, humorous. It carried a message of depth and weight. It just feels like his share just reached into my chest and gripped my heart without my consent. And I started busting up from the bottom of my belly, like this laughter that I hadn't felt since I was a little kid. And I believed that was the language of the heart. And I believed, you know what? God spoke through him to me, and I need to do some work around here. So that's why my community started to build there. It was right then and there where I realized there's a lot of people around here that were really messed up before, and they're doing quite well for themselves. I think I'm as a note taker too. Tell me about your relationship with God. Tell me how you tapped into your higher power. Why do you believe in God so much? What's your practice on a daily basis to stay in tune with God? I hit my knees and I pray. Oh, why? Why do you hit your knees? So I humble myself to my higher power. Oh, okay. Tell me more. And the more I did that and the more information I got, then I got to start to develop my own relationship with God. And God put the community in front of me of all these good people that had changed their lives completely. The transformation was evident. Evidence of God is all around me.
So one of the taps that I consistently see, and I'm feeling again here, is typically the things we're most resistant to.
Yeah.
That resistance they say what you resist persists. So it continues to trigger people until finally we submit to the process. And it's typically those things that we're the most vocal about, of not wanting or judgment or whatever it is, that ends up enlightening us.
Yes.
That is incredible. Oh man, this has been some great stuff. So one of the other things that you hit on that I want to revisit, because it's only really been the last 100, maybe 200 years where all of mankind, there was some form of apprenticeship. And you mentioned something about having a mentor or an apprentice or a sponsor. There's a lot of different names for it. How important is it to growth, do you think it is, to have a mentor or a person to help guide the path?
That's a brilliant question, and I'll tell you right now, I believe that every human being should have a guide, a mentor, somebody that can show them how to find their path. God placed angels in my path when I wasn't well. Siamak was put in my path not once, but twice. What are the odds that I'm going to end up at this guy's house 2 times? 2 different houses. And, I mean, I don't know if you're a follower of Rumi or know anything about Rumi, but even Rumi, when he thought he was so learned and so skilled when it came to God because of everything that he learned in books, he's teaching about God in the School of Divinity. God put a man named Shams Tabrizi in his path that was a homeless man that became his greatest teacher. And he said, I'm going to shed these wings of knowledge that I have so that I can learn from. He fell in love with him, not with him as a body, but with his soul. Mm-hmm. We all need teachers. You talked to me earlier about this. I was just listening to you, and you were talking about depression and suicidal ideation, and I've been there. The same thing you said about what if I try to kill myself and I'd end up a quadriplegic. I've talked about that same thing. Yeah. With my luck, I'd probably be like shacked up in some hospital. We need guides. We need people to shine the light and walk us through. But I also believe when I first got sober, I was self-reliant. And then when I found the sponsor that was going to take me through the steps, I became sponsor-reliant. I don't want to remain sponsor-reliant. I want to remain the student always. But the sponsor's goal is to put me in the hands of God so I become God-reliant. God should be my greatest teacher that I turn it over to every day. But there are lots of people I'll still turn to for guidance. Especially and usually those people, I already know what they're probably going to tell me. But you know what? Why not ask anyway? Because then suddenly they'll say something that I didn't expect. God speaks through people.
Yeah, that was so well put. So one of the more difficult questions is, because just like anything in life, there's great mentors, sponsors, coaches. Yeah. And there's real crappy ones. How would you suggest someone navigate that water to find a really good one? Because it sounds like you had an epic one that some people in the wrong hands may be with a person who just ends up doing more bad than good.
Well, I mean, I think it depends a lot. You know, like one of the things that we say in one of my home groups is if you're looking for a sponsor, like if you're a newcomer and you're looking for a sponsor, there's a lot of people out there that are doing sponsoring that might be in their last 30 days of recovery because we've seen it before. They relapse, and then all of a sudden you have a sponsor that relapsed. Well, there's your guide. I encourage people, if you're looking for a sponsor in a 12-step world, go up and ask that person, have you had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps? Because if they're awakened, there's your man or woman. Perfect. I also like being part of something where there's some people that like calling me their sponsor in AA. When I take them through the steps, you know what I tell them afterwards? Now you can sponsor me. Why don't we learn from each other? There's no hierarchy. I'd like you to take me through the steps now. Not because I want to see if you're going to do it correctly with other people, because I will learn from those people. My first sponsor, Amir, he's got cancer right now, and I just spent a couple of days with him up in LA at his house. And there's times when he's turned to me for some guidance, and he's the one that showed me the ropes in the beginning. So, yes, there are some crappy coaches out there, but I think people should go with their first intuition. If you're going to try to learn from somebody and if that person says something that captures your heart rather than your head, that's your person, most likely. I mean, why not? Yeah. And if you along the way get a feel that something doesn't feel right, you have the right to terminate the...
Yeah, you have the right to change your mind.
Yeah.
So we're coming up here on time, and thank you again for just sharing, being such an open book.
Thank you.
One of the questions I like to ask is, in that darkest hour, that 17-year-old boy, what was he needing to hear? So if you could go back in time with everything that you know, what would you tell that version of you?
Don't give up hope. It's going to be okay. You're going to get out of this. I think the darkest time was when I was locked up on suicide watch in the psych portion of that detention facility. I really wanted to die. I really did. I was losing it so bad that the same family psychologist that I didn't want to go to sessions with mom and dad and sister when I was high on drugs, I was begging to have them send him in just to like hear me out. And so in those darkest moments, I wanted to die. And I didn't, and I realized like, no, I think I actually did tell myself, no, just tough it through. And I would encourage anybody that's feeling like they want to throw in the towel, don't give up. Never give up. If you'd kill yourself, you'd be killing the wrong person.
I love the way you just shared that, because it's been my experience. A lot of people I've walked through is you have to kill that version of you.
Yes.
And as you kill the version of you, it allows this next version to come spiritually, emotionally, mentally, that starts to create this beautiful life. But if you mistakenly kill all of you, you don't give birth to that new version.
I know we're pressed for time, but I'll tell you exactly. You're absolutely right on that. There's the thing. Remember when I talked about the collective ego? Mm-hmm. We can dress things up and call them different things. That one version of you could potentially be the ego that wants to run the show. The ego could be the devil. It could be the disease of addiction. It could be alcoholism. It's basically the thing that's going to ruin you and does want to take you out of the game. It pretends like it's your best friend and it wants to separate you from everyone, including God. But if you can identify it, an ego has lots of layers. I think the art of good living is when a person can distinguish their ego from their soul and not give so much power to the ego, tap into the soul, because that is where God resides. And you're a man of God, and I believe our souls were here before our bodies were. It's all one, right? It's through God. So, yeah. It's an ego thing.
That's beautiful, man. PEJ, I'm so glad I finally got to meet you.
I'm glad I finally got to meet you too. You're a great man.
After all this time, ditto.
Yeah.
It takes one to know one, right?
Thanks.
So, I dug this, man. I go all day, but we'll be respectful of your time and just to say thank you, man.
Thank you, too, for having me. I really appreciate it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You got it.